This is JS Programming 2, Module 3 Lecture 1 of 2, and it's on ESRI web apps, particularly their pre-existing templates and their web app builder. So we're going to be extending conversations we've had in previous lectures. I'm your instructor, Robert Hewlett. You can contact me via Gmail or Twitter. The general learning outcome is to master, know, and understand all content and concepts discussed in lab, lecture, and the assigned readings. The specific learning outcomes, although not an absolute list, describe the benefits of prototyping, distinguish the various web app templates, describe the web app builder process in terms of picking a theme, picking the map, right? A lot of work here in getting the map ready, picking your widgets, and also setting attributes on the app itself. In lab, we will create web apps based on templates, and we'll create web apps using Web App Builder, the web version, not Web App Developer Edition where you make custom widgets, but the built-in one to AGO, ArcGIS Online. So prototyping. So there's a lot of benefits to prototyping. Increased user involvement is a very, I would say, it's easy to say, but it means a lot of things. Okay, so when the end users are involved in the process, they help clarify the product. What is it exactly that they want? So we can. The idea about prototyping is you make. It can be an evolutionary prototype, which eventually becomes the final product, but you make a product really quick, and so your tooling and your workflows have to be set up to make apps fast, adjust them, add more functionality, take things away that they don't like, and so you're making lots of different versions, cycling towards the final product. But in that, a lot of times in the beginning, a lot of people, you come from different worlds. You could be talking to sort of a land surveyor, or maybe you're talking to a land officer who deals with tenures, and you don't quite know their business. So it's not quite clear to you what tool would actually help them out the best. And so sometimes you have to make something, and it'll help you determine if you are on the right track or not. And it's okay to be off in the beginning. That's the whole idea. I'm going to make something, and you're going to probably tell me it's horrible, but that's fantastic because we'll get to the product that you really want. And so sometimes, being in a boardroom at a 45-minute meeting where people are talking all about different things going off in different directions, it's not as clear as when you put a product in front of their face and they use it and they tell you, yeah, that's not going to work, or they go, no, that's awesome. Could you add this? And that really helps you clarify that product so that in the end, you deliver a product that they needed and wanted. So there's lots of questions about what we're building in the beginning, right? And so there's nothing more clear than saying, well, the way we're heading is here's a sample app, put it on your phone. This is what we were thinking about, right? We want to identify problems early, right? Especially in GIS, to have an app that the end user is going to use, you'll start detecting data issues real fast. and there's lots of risk on typical GIS projects because there are so many more dimensions on a GIS project, right? It's not just technical or financial or political risk. Now there's data risk, and even within data we can break that down even into more categories. But because of these extra dimensions in GIS projects, then there is extra risk and we have to make sure that we're actively managing those. So you want to identify any problems early, things that aren't technically possible. There could be issues that, well, you guys are stuck on Oracle version, 10. If you were to migrate to 12, we'd be done, right? Our apps, we'd have the apps completed. So there's lots of things when you prototype is another term you'll hear me say is dealing in the real, right? So this pretend world that people build in that doesn't exist at the client's office, it's better to deal in the real with what they have, because then you're not going to deliver a broken app, right? The worst thing possible. And so identifying problems earlier could be, that's not what I meant. So sometimes, like I said, in meetings, it's if you're not familiar with the domain and speak their business language, the language of a land officer, the language of a uranium miner, or geologists, then it's easy to have a lot of issues around communication and misunderstanding, right? And nothing clears that up more than an actual app in front of people, and they can comment on whether they like it or not, right? Another one is that we don't have that kind of data, right? Like I said, data is this. It's almost, I swear on GS projects, it's an invisible elephant in the room. It's there, but a lot of people aren't seeing it. And it can utterly wipe out your project in the end if you don't have the right data for the app, right? Now, by identifying these problems early, you inherently save a lot of money. If you there's lots of stats that the earlier in the process that you identify a problem and solve it, you can save know tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars depending on the scale of the project. If you find something late after you've built everything, it is a nasty, expensive retrofit to fix that problem. A big thing about prototyping is high visibility, right? So people see you making stuff, right? So there's a lot of things going on there that helps you maintain support. One, they see you as a person or a company that gets things done. You are making prototypes, and I've used them, and I've commented on them, and I've given feedback, and you made adjustments so that people see you. They see you being successful. People see things happening, right? And so that maintains support. So if there's ever a thing like where maybe the project needs a little bit more money, people are like, yeah, no, they're making stuff. It's working. Yeah, give them money. Just make it happen. And so that's really important, right? So if you take one of these traditional waterfall approaches where you talk to the users in the beginning and then it's dead silence for 10 months, and then you deliver app right at the end that they haven't been able to use in that, it's easy to lose support along the way because they're like, well, I haven't heard anything out of those guys, right? And so it is a great way to, really hone in on the product and really keep your visibility high, which maintains your political and therefore typically financial support for the project. It's an active thing you got to keep managing, right? If you're not actively managing those types of things, then they're managing you. You just don't realize it, right? Training through testing. So by having the app in their hands and by using it and giving feedback on the prototype on what needs to be changed, they are effectively trained in how to use that product, right? Just by beta and alpha testing, right? And then you have people, and those people, if need be, could train other people how to do it. Train the trainers, and then they can train the rest of the people in there. And so by having people who have actually used the app and that, they can quickly show, the most effective way and efficient way to use that application and be successful with it. And that leads into increased user acceptance. So at the end, some contracts have big holdbacks on them, some don't, but some do. It could be up to 10 or 15% that they hold back that money until the application passes acceptance testing. And so that means that the end users are happy with the product that you've built. Now, if they've seen it and they've used it and they've given you feedback and you've made adjustments and you got it closer to what they wanted, then it's not a foregone conclusion, but your acceptance of the product is very high because they've seen it. It's more to what they want. They're happy with it. It's working. Usually what it is they're like, can I please have that on my phone or desktop, please? That sort of stuff. Like they're eager and ready to, no, let's get that app, right? It's really helping, so let's get it rolled out. And so that really helps you a lot in the overall process and getting your holdback money, which can be important as well. Now, one thing about Web App Builder or just in ArcGIS Online, they have a lot of stuff sort of ready to go. And so they have existing app templates built off of Web App Builder that you can basically grab and drop your map into. That would be the concept. The app is just waiting for the data, and the data in ArcGIS Online is the map. Okay. So there are a lot. There are about 37. So this would be like, don't even bother going into Web App Builder and dragging and dropping widgets on. Check out these templates first and see if they work for you. Right? There's 8 map stories, and we talked about map stories last week, right? Your basic map, which is not that fancy. The Cascade, which is, it's a great looking story map, but you have to have the right content, which means, high res photos and really good, uh, sort of HD videos and things like that. And even in your photos, some, classic, uh, was it Pixel 500 kind of shots, that kind of stuff. So good shots, right? And that. So even though it's a nice story map, you really have to have the right media to drop into it. Otherwise, it looks like a dog's breakfast. So again, there's crowdsourcing and the map journal, map series. Again, the thing about map series is it's a bunch of maps. So, and I will keep hitting this point home as much as I can throughout the course. There's a lot of work around the data and getting the map right. If you have the right layers and the right map, it's really uh, a pleasurable process building the apps for it. Okay, but it's a lot of work. This type of work never goes away in GS projects. There's always that data massage part, but if you do it right, then the app building process is very simplified with these templates and web app builder, and you can quickly build some really great apps in a day if you already have your maps set up and ready to go. Right, map shortlist again, more maps. And so to use these types of storybooks there's a lot of work. I was going to keep driving it home as much as I can, getting the data ready and then making the maps from it. The swipe ones, the spyglass, they're kind of cool, but then we're talking about maps that are superimposed on each other. So that means you need, for the exact same area, different data sets. It could be satellite data from the past 10 years or something like that. So it's getting all that stuff together and organized, right? Sometimes when you use these templates and web app builder, it's almost too easy making the app, which is not a bad thing, but it hides the fact that you gotta have all that data ready to go, prepped and ready to go, and organized into maps. And then it's figuring out, where do I make adjustments? Do I make adjustments on the map, or do I make it somewhere else in the data in the layers? And of course, the map tour, great for if you have a bunch of geotag photos. And so if you have some on your phone, you can play around and see if that would be effective for what you're trying to do. There are other app templates. There's about 7 that do collection and editing. So this is really important in GIS. A lot of what we're trying to do is get GIS out in the field to either collect new data or update existing data. Can we go out and verify that that really is the type of telephone pole that's out there? Is it really wood, or is it steel, or some other type of material? Is that really what's bolted onto it? So that sort of updating your headquarters database by what's actually out in the field, right? As plans versus as builts. And so this is really big in the GIS industry, is to get this data out there in the field on field devices so that we can keep the databases up to date. There's some stat that 20% of data in databases is sort of old and out of sync, right? So, and then you're making decisions based on that bad data. And so the better we can make the data, and these applications help us do that by making sure that what they say is in the field is really there, really helps us make better decisions. So very important, these types of templates. And so there's some crowdsourcing ones. There's 5 under there. There's crowdsource manager, crowdsource polling, and a reporter, all with editing capabilities. And this is where you're trying to get through a lot of people out in the field with devices to, check out a whole bunch of different things. There's geoform and information lookup. It's funny where this editing gets tucked in. Again, for all this to work, your map has to be right. So I'm going to drive this point home again. You have to have a map with a feature service in it, and that feature service has to be set up to be editable. Otherwise, we can't do any of this and that. So really important to have your map rights right. There's also general editing. So even the basic viewer one, which I was surprised to actually find editing capabilities in it, but it's there. So even their basic viewer has editing built in, and of course their edit viewer. The edit viewer is actually a more focused, scaled down version. Let's just get to the editing, which I don't mind because then it's a much more focused app, right? But there's your 7 that actually do that collection in the field right now. At any moment in time, they can drop more templates in, just so you know. There's lots for comparing map and layers. Some of this are going to be repeats. There's compare analysis, local perspective, which is a very intriguing uh, flexible and functional, almost too much. It's approaching that line of having too much in it, but it's a very intriguing template. There's a lot of stuff packed in there, right? Map carousel again. If we're gonna have a carousel of maps, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of maps you got to get together because maps need a lot of data, right? So they look uh, tantalizing, but I mean, I understand the work it takes to get all that data massaged, trimmed up, sort of vetted, and then you know working on the cartography and then getting it published and that sort of thing. So, and then you have to do that again and again and again in order to have map carousel, right? Public information, we've seen this one before. Some of the previous story maps, so the map series, the map swipe, and the map spyglass are a great way to compare maps against each other. So that means you need a lot of data in the same area. It doesn't have to be time variant, but that's the natural one. This is what it looked like in 1947. This is what it looked like in 1996. This is what it looks like now. Again, it doesn't have to be time variation, but that's sort of the natural fit that you're comparing before and after stuff, before the tsunami, after the tsunami. So there's usually time sensitive data all in the same area. There are app templates to display in 3D. Now this area I predict will grow, right? So as more people use Arc Pro and more people get 3D data with LiDAR scans and that, and more people get into the 3D, then their templates in these areas will also grow. Okay, so just 3D visualization, just a 3D scene, right? The simple scene viewer, compare scenes. Now again, compare scenes is it's like the 2D one, right? Except it's 3D. A big thing here, as we mentioned before, and I'll probably mention again in this lecture, is that the 2D is based on the 3 API and the 4D is based on the 4 API. So they had to rebuild some of these same templates on the 3D side because they're using a different version of the API, right? And the scene styler. And again, like I said, 3D templates use the 4. Just going to keep burning that in there because if you ever get down to the Web App Builder Developer Edition, you will be switched. Hopefully you can focus on either the 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional. Otherwise, you're switching between the two, and there's enough changes in there that you'll drive yourself crazy throughout the day. So very important. Lots of things to explore and summarize data. So exploring data is pretty simple. It's more like identifying and stuff like that. But summarizing is charts and that. So we can explore elevation data and look at profiles. We can filter data. So it's kind of like similar to writing a query or a definition query, and restricting the features that are displayed on the screen. Impact summary and the summary viewer. Also time aware, right? Layers as well. The geolist fits into this category too, right? There's also make a gallery, right? Map carousel. Need lots of maps again. Drive that home. Maps and apps gallery. Again, now you need lots of maps. Apps need lots of maps, and now you need lots of apps. So even more and more work, right, to get that together. There's also a minimum gallery, but the gallery is it's still a bunch of maps. So there's a bunch of data to get and polish up and correctly apply cartography to it so that it looks good on the device. So they may sound simple, a map gallery, but for a JS person, there's a bit of work in there, right? But we can take it on. There's lots of map social media, right? Some of these are tied to the existing story maps, right? Public information and live maps. And that previous ones were the map tour. There's also provide local information. So some of these are going to start repeating because they've shown up in other areas. So the crowdsource polling, impact summary, information lookup, live maps, local perspective. There it is again. Very, like I said, very intriguing template, and public information, as well as story map crowdsource. Okay, and so there's a lot of templates and different applications that you can use for different sort of purposes, and the map tour as well. Route and directions, one of these is new. So there is a app just focusing on directions. Previous one, so in local perspective, you can pop directions. It's a panel that'll pop. So like I said, there's a lot there's a lot packed into local perspective, and I said it before, almost too much for one template, but it's actually done well. Showcase a map, so a lot of these you're going to see repeating again. And that. So the map styler, map tools, minimalist view, a simple map viewer. Some previous ones, of course, were the story map basic version, basic viewer as well. So what you can do now is pause this video lecture and watch the web app builder demo. So what I want to talk about now is web app builder itself. So when you first come in, and this is the web version, that's what we'll be using in this course. When you create a new web app with web app builder, not the templates, you're going to be asked a question, 2 or 3D. This is this crucial thing, because from here we use a different API of the JavaScript. You got to fill in the title and some tags, and that's always good to put it, create a folder ahead of time that you want to put it into. Just keep yourself organized. You'll find that once you start playing around with ArcGIS Online, you make a mess pretty fast, so it does help to start using folders to organize things. So once you pick whether you're going 2 or 3D, you'll be presented certain themes. So themes have a color, a few things, sort of like a little bit of coloring and stuff like that. Also, where the icons, well, widgets will be placed. And so sometimes, you know, the thumbnails don't do them justice. You got to get in there and play around a little bit and that. And so you got to pick a theme, pick a style, color scheme basically, and then pick a layout. And that's just beginning. That's just going to give you some basic layout control. Where do you want your layouts to be? Where do you want your controls to be laid out? Top, bottom, left, right. How many panels do you want displayed? Those types of questions. And then the next step, you could preview it just to see what it's going to look like. I put this as the next step because you can actually preview it right away to see how the control is going to flip around. Right. So in here you can pick a device. I would say that if your idea is to go to the phone, don't test on a tablet. I see this all the time. If your idea is to go to phone, pick a phone. Pick a Nexus 5 and pick a smaller phone. Nexus 5 or maybe an early iPhone, you know, 4-inch screen, stuff like that, to see, okay, what's really going to happen here? And does that make sense? And you can flip landscape and portrait. I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, but if you can in the video, it's up here in the sort of upper right-hand corner of the screen capture, just under my name, Robert, where you can flip from portrait to landscape, just to see what happens with the controls and if you think that's okay. So they have a lot of slide outs here. There's a technique they use, a little slide out on the bottom to bring up all the panels that would have been displayed on the desktop. Then pick your map, right? And so you've done your theme and stuff like that. You can take a quick preview view of it to see what it might look like. And then you got to pick your map. And so if your data is all set up and organized in a map, then you just drop it in. Boom. It's that easy in that. And so typically you pick a map from your existing collections of maps that you have available to you in your organizational portal or ArcGIS Online. And then the layout, you know, dictates where the widgets will be, but then you have to pick, well, what widgets do I want, right? And how many do I want? And so there's a couple of customization areas. You can customize the header. So where it says class demo all the way over on the right, you'll see that there's 2 displayed right now, which is typically the legend and the layers button. So you can take those off if you don't want them, or you can add more, but I wouldn't, you know, avoid cluttering. And then there's your main widget area. Typically it depends if you pick the 3 or 5 widget templates, and that you don't have to use all these. These are just placeholders, and you don't have to use them all, right? You just Just because they have 5 spots for widgets, you can just use one if you want, if it works for you, right? If it does what the app is supposed to do, and that. And so you have and again, what you pick from is a big category of pre-existing widgets. Okay, and that. And you have to get in there and play around with them to see if some of them even make sense for what you're trying to do. They have lots of things about scale bars. They have lots of things about measuring. But if you're on a phone and you're measuring, are you meant to uh, grab that information, that length, that distance, and send it to someone else? You can do the classic copy paste on a phone, but it's nice if it's built into, save that information to the clipboard quickly, which would be nice, and that. But sometimes not. They have print widgets. Do they make sense? Right? If there is a print widget, definitely get the app on your phone and try printing to see if that's going to work. So what we'll do now is a little bit of a demo of Web App Builder, right? So now you can actually pause this video presentation, and this is where we'll actually build an app with Web App Builder and put some of the widgets on there. Now that we're back, we'll talk about the map a little bit more. So the map, right? It's the thing with the layers, right? The crucial component of all of these apps, right? None of these apps, except for maybe the Cascade story map, are going to work well without a map. So there is serious and real effort, and it's the classic GIS workflow. Massaging the data to make the map, right? So base map, right? The base map they adopted. There is an article online about when they adopted the Google and Bing projection. So when they first started out, they weren't so focused on the 3857, but it became obvious that when you're trying to integrate with these other resources, because they're all bought into this one particular projection and one particular tile scheme, that in order to play friendly with them and play well, they had to move that way too. And so even in a product like ArcPro, which has a new facility in it for just making base maps, those base maps have to be in 3857. And I've even posted on GeoNet, is that the way it's going to be forever, or do you have the ability to do what I would call a local base map in a different projection? Because if it is, that's the way it's going to be, then GS people just need to know so we can move the data around, and also be aware that when the data is coming back in from those collecting tools, that it's classically going to be in a different projection in that. Right, so like I said, ArcPro has this new facility just for making base maps, but it only seems to let you publish if you're in 3857, which is WebMecator. Right, there are 2 parts in ArcPro. So the 3 version of the API had just base maps, so they were a layer that sat on the bottom. The new API actually takes a base map and splits it into 2. There's a top and a bottom, and your layers go in between like a sandwich, right? So the traditional base sinks to the bottom, and the reference floats to the top. And the reference, you decide what you want to be reference layers, but typically it's the annotation. But you do have the ability when you're making up a map in ArcPro to designate a layer as reference or as base, and then you can publish it. Layers in a map. So when you're making a map in ArcGIS Online, it doesn't have to be the way, but the layers are typically tied to ArcGIS server services. Now they can be within ArcGIS Online, or they can be external. Like the City of Surrey has some web services published that you can hit live in that. And so besides the base maps typically being 3857, then you typically go to these layers, and hopefully these people have published these layers in 3857 as well, and everything overlays properly. Within these ArcGIS services, 2 big categories would be feature, which are vectors, your point lines, polygons, or images, right? When you have a map, an ArcPro or ArcMap, and you have a mixture of images and vectors, and you publish it to ArcGIS Online, it actually rips your map apart. It takes all of the images and puts it on their image side of ArcGIS Online, and it takes all your vectors and puts it on the vector side of ArcGIS Online. So when you get in there and look at the back-end services that get created from you publishing a map, you'll notice that part of it goes over to Services 1 and part of it goes over to Tiles 1, right, which is their image side, right? Also, within ArcPro or ArcMap is you typically need to adopt editing templates because these get used by these editing views or templates that do editing, right? So what are editing templates? There's a couple of things. There's the back end would be a feature service with editing turned on, right? And the rendering information. And so part of the editing template is the renderer. So if you did a unique value renderer with different colors, it's pretty important because that's how the user actually interacts with the app. They click on one of those features stylized that way to say I'm placing this type of a fire hydrant or this type of a road. You can also configure pop-ups now, and we can do this in ArcPro now. How do you want when someone clicks on a feature and a little pop-up shows up, what attributes do you want to be shown? Now you can configure this back in ArcPro, which is sort of a new type of functionality, or you can do it when you're in ArcGIS Online. So in ArcGIS Online, you open up the map and map viewer, you click on a layer, there's a little ellipse button at the end, and then you can get to a menu that has more options, and you can configure pop-ups there and also deal with how attachments are handled, right? So not only what attributes do you want to display, but also how do you want to handle the attachments in terms of how it looks in the pop-up. So there's a lot of stuff going on there to get your maps ready. This is why I was, besides just the base data and getting it massaged and ready, then there's all these other issues going on when we're trying to build within ArcGIS Online or for ArcGIS Online. Right? And like I said, now ArcPro, besides this base map facility, you can also do this configuration of pop-ups on the Pro side before you publish. So a little note on the APIs, right? Again, I just want to drive this home officially, right? When you're doing 2D, you are using the 3.x JavaScript API. When you're doing 3D, you are using the 4.x. I say .x because they're always rolling out new versions. Version of the API. Now the 4 version has not taken over the whole world yet because it can't do all of the editing that the 3 can do. And so when the 4 matures completely, by that being it has all of the functionality or all the functionality that they are planning on porting from 2 to 4, then all of those templates in ArcGIS Online that were 2D need to be rewritten in 4. A daunting task, just so you know, but that's something that would happen. Eventually they would want to be 4, but by the time they make that move, they'll be on the 5th version of the API, and we'll see what happens then, right? So other things that happen or differences that happen are the graphics layer, right, is different. So they use a collection versus an array. So in the 3x graphics on a graphics layer were just a simple array in JavaScript. Now they're a collection, and you see where this happens a lot where they used to have a simple array doing something, they moved it to a classic collection like in Java where you have add and remove methods. So the reason I mention this is because a lot of these widgets, the way they work, like upload a shapefile and the shapefile appears on your map. Well, how do they do that? They add a graphics layer to your map on the fly, and they put the data from the shape file into the graphics container. Lots of the tools that you draw on top of the map, how do they do that? They add a graphics layer to the map, and they draw on the graphics layer, and so then it looks like you're drawing on the map. So a lot of these widgets, right, that allow you to interact with the map do so by adding a graphics layer. When you go dig through the templates to modify them in the developer edition, this is what you find going on. And so if you have a lot of widgets that add graphics containers to your map, you end up with a lot of graphics containers, and all of those would have to change to migrate from the 3x to the 4. It's a fundamental difference. Web workers are another big change, and hopefully this helps drive the adoption. So web workers is where you spin up other processes to help you, chew through data within JavaScript in the browser, and this can help you do a lot of client-side geoprocessing. So today, to buffer something, the workflow is to send a buffer request back to a geoprocessing service, maybe a simple geometry service you have running somewhere. And then a few seconds later, right, it comes back from the service and a new layer slides into your map. How's that layer slide in? Graphics layer gets added to your map. But that process is a 2-3 second hit, or even more depending how busy the server is. They also have a small geometry engine that can do buffering on the client side. And to do a buffer on the client side is instantaneous. So fast that you click the button and boom, it appears on the screen. Nanoseconds. And in other courses, I talk about a library called Turf. Turf is a client-side JavaScript library for doing, your traditional unions and things like that, generating hexabins, and it's all done client-side in JavaScript, typically. And the reason they do that is because JavaScript is at a state now where it's fast enough to do that, and it is really slick in terms of generating that data to a point where on small operations, because the geoprocessing services are so slow, they have a thing where they sleep, and so they got to wake up and stuff like that. So, and so that whole wake up process, JavaScript has already got it on the screen and on to the next thing. And so I would see that it all depends how Eastereye feels about the geoprocessing, because that's how they make their money, that and geocoding. So how much of that will come over to the client side? But you do have the ability to integrate other people's libraries if you want on the JavaScript side. So you can get someone else to do the actual processing. And it really does help out to have that, because a lot of the browsers are running on, what mini supercomputers, in all honesty, the number of cores and the things that they can do. Again, the web worker framework from 3 to 4 is a drastic change, completely different, and I will say much better on the 4 side. And there's lots of other subtle changes, just so you know. Symbology is about the same, but there's lots of other changes that just wreak havoc. Now, when will everything be 4x? Not sure. I've heard rumors, not so much rumors, people have stated what they thought depending what they hit along the way. So if you get on GeoNet at Eastereye, you'll actually find me asking this question, and you'll see an Eastereye person getting back to me. So I think he said first or second quarter 2018, which we're in. But it depends, what kind of issues they hit in that migration. And they left it open-ended because they really don't know when they're going to get there. So they can't commit to a date because they don't know what's going to happen. And even once 4 gets there, they have so many templates built, right? There's so many that they have to update, 37 already. And one thing to look for is when you see the base map switcher, if you see about 10 base maps, then you know you're dealing with the 3, right? If all of a sudden you see 15 base maps show up, right, then you know you're dealing with the 4 and that sort of thing. But that's the classic base map thing is kind of capped at 10 on the 3, but there are more on the 4 once you get in there. So that's one visual thing where you kind of know which API you're in, is just through the base maps and what's available. So if you need to re-examine a topic or need clarification on a term or concept, or just have a question, you can get an answer by posting a note on one of the discussion boards for this course. This concludes this lecture.